The Great Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest room ever built by any species in known space. It stretched for nearly a mile in every direction, with seats rising in endless tiers toward a ceiling that glowed with artificial starlight. Representatives from over 400 species filled those seats, their forms ranging from the familiar to the utterly alien. Some breathed oxygen. Others required methane or chlorine. A few existed as pure energy, contained in specially designed vessels. But all of them had gathered for the same reason. Today, the Council would deliver its verdict on the human question. Ambassador Linda Morrison sat in the small section reserved for humanity. Compared to the vast delegations of elder species like the Valith or the Kethrani, the human presence seemed almost pathetic. Just 12 seats. 12 representatives for a species that controlled over 200 colony worlds and commanded a population of nearly 50 billion souls. The seating arrangement was deliberate, of course. Everything in the Council was designed to remind younger species of their place. Linda had spent 20 years as a diplomat. She had learned to smile when insulted. She had learned to accept unfair terms because the alternative was worse. She had learned to swallow her pride and tell herself that patience would eventually pay off. Today, she was done learning those lessons. The Valith High Speaker rose from his elevated platform at the center of the chamber. His name was Zithros, and he had held his position for over 300 years. His species lived for nearly 1,000 years, and they never let anyone forget it. To the Valith, humans were mayflies. Briefly amusing, ultimately insignificant, Zethros clicked his mandibles 3 times, the Valith gesture for demanding silence. The chamber fell quiet immediately. Even species that privately despised the Valith knew better than to show disrespect openly. The Council has deliberated on the matter of human expansion, Zethros announced. His voice was translated instantly into hundreds of languages, broadcast to every seat in the chamber. We have reviewed human activities over the past 50 years and found them troubling. Your species has grown too quickly. You have colonized worlds that were reserved for future Council allocation. You have developed military technologies without proper oversight. You have failed to show appropriate deference to your elders and betters. Linda kept her expression neutral, but her hands tightened on the armrests of her chair. Beside her, Commander Patrick Hayes of the Diplomatic Security Detail noticed the movement. He had known Linda for 15 years. He had never seen her this angry. Therefore, Zethros continued, the Council has determined the following terms. Humanity will surrender 40% of its colonial holdings. These worlds will be redistributed to species more deserving of them. Humanity will reduce its military fleet to defensive vessels only, with a maximum of 50 ships. All other vessels will be decommissioned under Council supervision. Humanity will accept permanent observer status with no voting rights on any Council matter. These terms are effective immediately and are not subject to negotiation. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Some species seemed surprised by the harshness of the verdict. Others nodded in approval. A few looked toward the human section with something like sympathy, so none would dare express it openly. Linda rose from her seat. The murmurs died away. In 300 years of Council membership, no human had ever spoken without being granted permission first. It simply was not done. Junior species waited to be acknowledged. They did not demand attention. The United Earth government has received your terms, Linda said. Her voice carried clearly through the translation systems. We have considered them carefully, and we reject them entirely. Silence. Complete and total silence. Even Zethros seemed frozen, his mandibles half open in shock. Furthermore, Linda continued, humanity is formally withdrawing from the Galactic Council. All treaties, all agreements, all diplomatic arrangements are hereby terminated. Effective immediately. Zethros recovered enough to speak. You cannot do this. The Council does not permit withdrawal. You are bound by the agreements your ancestors signed. Our ancestors signed those agreements under duress, Linda replied calmly. They were given a choice between accepting unfair terms or watching their homeworld be destroyed. That is not consent. That is coercion. And humanity no longer recognizes any obligation arising from coercion. The Kethrani ambassador A gray-skinned politician named Vorith, who was known throughout the galaxy for his cunning, leaned forward in his seat. His species had always been more practical than the Valeth. They understood power and how it shifted. He watched the human ambassador with new interest. "You are making a terrible mistake," Sethros warned. "Without the Council's protection, humanity will be vulnerable. There are species who would gladly claim your worlds, your resources, your people. You will be destroyed within a generation," Linda smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "We will take our chances." She turned to her delegation. "We are leaving. Now." The 12 humans rose as one and walked toward the exit. The chamber remained silent as they departed. No one tried to stop them. No one quite knew what to do. In 4,000 years of Council history, no species had ever simply walked away. As the doors closed behind her, Linda allowed herself a single deep breath. Her hands were shaking slightly. She had just ended 3 centuries of careful diplomacy with a single speech. She had made enemies of the most powerful political body in the galaxy. She had put 50 billion human lives at risk, and she had never felt more certain of anything in her life. Patrick Hayes fell into step beside her as they walked through the corridor toward the docking bay where their ship waited. "That was something," he said quietly. "It was overdue," Linda replied. "The Valeth will retaliate." "You know that?" "I know. Are we ready?" Linda thought about the reports she had seen before leaving Earth. The secret projects. The hidden fleets. The technologies that humanity had developed in silence while pretending to be harmless. 300 years of preparation for a moment that everyone had hoped would never come, but everyone had known was inevitable. "We are ready," she said. "We have been ready for a very long time." Behind them, the council chamber descended into chaos. Species that had barely spoken to each other in centuries suddenly found themselves engaged in heated debates. The Valeth demanded immediate military action against the humans. The Kathrani counseled patience and observation. Smaller species huddled together nervously, wondering what this meant for their own positions. The old order was cracking. Everyone could feel it. The question was, what would emerge from the fractures in the docking bay? The human diplomatic vessel Horizon waited with engines already warming. Captain Maria Santos stood at the bottom of the boarding ramp, her expression tense. "Ambassador," she said as Linda approached, "we just received word from Earth. The President has authorized full implementation of Protocol Omega." Linda nodded slowly. Protocol Omega. The plan that had existed in various forms. Since humanity first realized that the Council would never treat them fairly. The plan that would either secure humanity's future or destroy them utterly. "Then it begins," she said quietly. She walked up the ramp without looking back. There was nothing left to see. The chapter of human history that had begun with desperate submission to alien powers was over. A new chapter was beginning. Whether it would end in triumph or tragedy, no one could say, but humanity would face it standing, not kneeling. The Horizon lifted off from the station and turned toward human space. Behind it, the great chamber of the Galactic Council continued to echo with arguments and accusations. Ahead lay the unknown. Linda Morrison watched the stars through the viewport and allowed herself a small, fierce smile. "Let them come," she thought. "Let them all come. They have no idea what they are about to face." The news spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Every species with access to the communication networks heard the same story within hours. Humanity had rejected the Council's terms. Humanity had withdrawn from all treaties. Humanity was alone. For most observers, the reaction was simple disbelief. Junior species did not defy the Council. It had never happened before. The entire structure of galactic civilization was built on the assumption that smaller powers would always submit to larger ones. The strong ruled. The weak obeyed. That was how things worked. That was how things had always worked, and now the humans had simply said no on the Valeth homeworld. High Commander Zethrix received his orders directly from the Imperial Senate. The humans had insulted the honor of the Valeth people. They had humiliated the High Speaker before the entire Council. Such defiance could not be tolerated. An example must be made. Zethryx was old even by Valeth standards. He had commanded fleets for over 400 years. He had crushed rebellions on a dozen worlds. He had never lost a battle. When he reviewed the intelligence reports on human military capabilities, he felt nothing but contempt. The humans had perhaps 300 warships in their entire fleet. The Valeth could mobilize 10 times that number. The outcome of any conflict was predetermined. "We will strike at their border colony," Zethryx told his officers. "New Providence. It is lightly defended and close to our territory. We will destroy their orbital installations and demand immediate surrender. When they submit, we will impose terms far harsher than the Council originally proposed. Other species will see what happens to those who defy the natural order." His officers agreed enthusiastically. Some of them were already discussing how they would divide the spoils of conquest. Human technology was primitive by Valeth standards, but human worlds were rich in resources. There would be much to claim. Meanwhile, across human space, a very different kind of preparation was underway. Admiral George Crawford stood in the command center of Earth Defense Command, watching status reports flow across dozens of screens. He was 62 years old, with gray hair and a face lined by decades of service. He had joined the human fleet as a young ensign and risen through the ranks during the long years of peace. Now he would lead humanity into its first true war. "Protocol Omega is proceeding on schedule," reported his aide, Commander Sarah Wells. "All reserve fleets have been activated. Hidden shipyards are bringing vessels online. We should have full deployment within 72 hours. Crawford nodded slowly. "What about the civilian evacuation? Already underway? Priority transports are moving non-essential personnel from border worlds to interior colonies. Essential workers are being given the choice to stay or leave. And our friends in the Council." Sarah hesitated. "The Kathrani have gone silent. The Relari have recalled their ambassadors. Most other species are waiting to see what happens." Crawford had expected as much. No one would support humanity openly. The risk was too great. But he had also noticed that no one was rushing to join the Valeth either. The galaxy was watching, waiting to see which way the wind would blow. "Sir," another officer called out, "we have movement. Valeth fleet has departed their staging area. 72 warships on course for New Providence." Crawford turned to the main display. The Valeth fleet appeared as red dots moving through space toward the blue marker that represented the human colony. At their current speed, they would arrive in approximately 6 hours. "Send word to Commander Walsh," Crawford ordered. "Tell her the guests are coming." On the far side of human space, Commander Katie Walsh received the message aboard her vessel, the Reckoning. She was 41 years old, with dark hair cut short and eyes that missed nothing. She had spent her entire career preparing for this moment. War games, simulations, endless training exercises. All of it building toward a confrontation that everyone hoped would never come. Now it was here. "All ships," she broadcast to the hidden fleet scattered throughout the New Providence system. "This is Commander Walsh. The Valeth are inbound. 72 vessels. They expect to find a dozen defenders and an easy victory. They are about to learn that humanity is done being underestimated." The fleet responded with acknowledgments from 300 captains. Their ships were concealed throughout the system, hidden behind asteroids, lurking in the shadow of gas giants, drifting in the dark with minimal power signatures. The Valeth sensors would never detect them until it was far too late. Katie turned to her first officer, Lieutenant Commander Daniel Price. "Status of all weapons systems." "Fully charged and ready, ma'am. New targeting algorithms are loaded. Point defense networks are synchronized." "And the special packages?" Daniel allowed himself a small smile. "Ready to deploy on your command. The Valeth have never seen anything like them. Nobody has." The special packages were the result of 300 years of secret research. While humanity had publicly maintained a modest military force, their best scientists and engineers had worked in hidden facilities on technologies that would shock the galaxy. New weapons, new shields, new propulsion systems. All of it developed quietly, tested secretly, and held in reserve for the day. when humanity would need every advantage it could get. That day had arrived. Katie settled back in her command. Charon watched the countdown clock. 6 hours until the Valeth arrived. 6 hours until the galaxy discovered what humanity was truly capable of. 6 hours until everything changed. On Earth. President Daniel Hughes addressed the people in a broadcast that reached every human world. He stood in the historic chamber where the original United Earth government had been founded, surrounded by the flags of all the nations that had once divided humanity. "My fellow humans," he began. "By now you have heard that we have withdrawn from the Galactic Council. You have heard that the Valeth are sending a fleet to attack our colony at New Providence. You may be afraid. You may be uncertain. These feelings are natural. We are facing the greatest challenge in our history." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But I want you to know something. We did not make this decision lightly. We did not act out of pride or anger. We acted because we had no other choice. For 300 years, we have tried to work within a system that was designed to keep us weak. We have been patient. We have been reasonable. And in return, we have been exploited and threatened." Another pause. It ends today. "From this moment forward, humanity stands alone. But we do not stand unprepared. Our military has capabilities that the galaxy cannot imagine. Our people have strength that has never been tested. We will face whatever comes with courage and determination. And we will show the universe that humanity bows to no one." The broadcast ended. Across human space, people gathered in homes and public squares, talking quietly about what lay ahead. Fear mixed with something else. Something that had been buried for centuries under layers of caution and compromise, hope and pride. The hours passed. The Valeth fleet drew closer. And in the New Providence system, 300 human warships waited in the darkness, ready to deliver a message that would echo across the stars. The galaxy was about to learn a very important lesson about underestimating. Humanity, the Valeth fleet, dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the New Providence system with all the confidence of a predator approaching helpless prey. 72 warships arranged in perfect attack formation, their hulls gleaming with the distinctive purple metal that had become a symbol of Valeth power throughout the galaxy. Each vessel bristled with weapons that had destroyed countless enemies over thousands of years. High Commander Zethrix stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and surveyed the human system with barely concealed contempt. His sensors showed exactly what he had expected: a single inhabited planet, 2 orbital stations, a handful of defensive platforms, and precisely 12 human warships arranged in a pathetic defensive line between his fleet and the colony. 12 ships, his tactical officer reported. Standard human military vessels. No unusual readings. Zethrix clicked his mandibles in amusement. They send 12 ships to face 72. Either they are brave or they are stupid. Perhaps both. Shall we open communications, Commander? Yes. I will give them one chance to surrender. When they refuse, we will destroy them and claim this system for the Valeth Empire. The communications channel opened, and Zethrix spoke with the arrogance of 400 years of unchallenged military supremacy. Human vessels. This is High Commander Zethrix of the Valeth Imperial Fleet. You have defied the Galactic Council and insulted the honor of the Valeth people. You will power down your weapons and surrender immediately. If you comply, your lives will be spared. If you resist, you will be destroyed without mercy. There was a pause. Then a human voice responded, calm and steady, despite the overwhelming force arrayed against her. Valeth Fleet. This is Commander Katie Walsh of the United Earth Defense Force. You have entered human, sovereign space without authorization. You will power down your weapons and withdraw immediately, or you will be destroyed. You have 60 seconds to comply. Zethrix stared at his communications display in disbelief. A human commander was threatening him? With 12 ships? The sheer audacity of it was almost impressive. You dare threaten the Imperial fleet? He responded, You are outnumbered 6-1. You have no allies, no reinforcements. Your pathetic resistance will accomplish nothing except ensuring that your deaths are slow and painful. Katie Walsh's voice remained perfectly calm. 50 seconds. Zethrix turned to his officers. Charge all weapons. Advance to attack range. These humans need to learn their place. The Valith fleet began moving forward, their formation spreading into the classic attack pattern that had crushed so many enemies before. Weapon systems hummed with power. Targeting computers locked onto the human vessels. In moments, the battle would begin. On the bridge of the reckoning, Katie watched the enemy approach with the patience of a hunter who had laid a perfect trap. Her first officer, Daniel Price, stood beside her, monitoring the countdown. 30 seconds, he said quietly. All ships, maintain position, Katie ordered. Do not fire until my command. The 12 visible human ships held their ground as the Valith armada bore down on them. To any observer, it looked like suicide. Brave, perhaps, but utterly hopeless. 20 seconds. The Valith weapons began to glow as they prepared to fire. Zethrix allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. This would be easier than he had thought. 10 seconds. Katie Walsh took a deep breath. 300 years of preparation, countless hours of training, entire generations of human scientists and engineers working in secret. It all came down to this moment. 5 seconds. Commander, her tactical officer reported, Valith weapons are fully charged. They're about to fire. 4, 3, 2, 1. Mark, Katie said, and the darkness came alive from behind asteroids and moons. From the shadows of gas giants and the depths of debris fields, 300 human warships emerged simultaneously. Their engines flared to life. Their weapons powered up. Their shields activated with a distinctive shimmer that no Valith officer had ever seen before. On the Eternal Dominion, Zethrix watched in stunned horror as his tactical display transformed from a simple conquest into a nightmare. The 12 human ships had been bait, a distraction. The real fleet had been waiting in ambush all along. Impossible, he breathed. Our sensors showed nothing. Nothing. Commander, we're being surrounded. Enemy ships on all vectors. Their weapons are charging. Unknown energy signatures. The human fleet did not give the Valith time to recover. Katie Walsh's voice cut through the chaos, broadcast to every human vessel in the system. All ships, weapons free. Show them what humanity can do. The first volley struck the Valith fleet before they could even raise their shields. New weapons that human scientists had developed in secret laboratories. Energy beams that cut through Valith armor like it was paper. Missiles that could not be intercepted by any known countermeasure. Electronic warfare systems that turned enemy targeting computers into useless noise. The Eternal Dominion shuddered as multiple impacts struck its hull. Alarms screamed. Officers shouted damage reports. Zethrix gripped his command chair as his flagship, his undefeatable flagship, began to burn. Return fire, he roared. All ships, return fire. The Valith fleet tried to respond, but their weapons seemed almost useless against the human ships. Energy beams that should have torn through armor were absorbed by shields that glowed with golden light. Missiles that should have been unstoppable were shot down by point defense systems of impossible accuracy. The humans moved through the battle with a speed and coordination that seemed almost inhuman. Ship after ship fell. The Pride of Valith, a cruiser that had served for 800 years, exploded in a ball of fire. The Conquest Eternal, pride of the Third Fleet, was cut in half by a sustained energy beam. The Dominance, the Supremacy, the Invincible, all of them died in the first 5 minutes of the battle. Zethrix watched, his fleet being systematically destroyed, and understood that everything he had believed about human weakness was wrong. Not just wrong. Catastrophically, fatally wrong. All ships, he ordered, his voice cracking with desperation. Retreat. Emergency faster-than-light jump. Get us out of here. But the human fleet was already moving to cut off escape routes. Vessels that had seemed spread across the system suddenly converged with terrifying precision. The trap was complete. Katie Walsh watched the Valith flagship struggle to escape and felt no satisfaction, only grim determination. "Target their engines," she ordered. "Disable, don't destroy. I want survivors. I want witnesses." The Reckoning's weapons struck the Eternal Dominion with surgical precision, crippling its propulsion systems without destroying the ship. Zethryx felt his vessel shudder and go still, adrift in the middle of the battle. Around him, the remains of his fleet burned. 68 ships destroyed. 4 had managed to escape into faster than light before the trap closed. 4 out of 72? The battle had lasted 11 minutes. Human losses. Katie opened a channel to the crippled Valith flagship. "Hi, Commander Zethryx. This is Commander Walsh. Your fleet has been destroyed. Your vessel is disabled. You will surrender and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with lethal force." There was a long pause. Then, Zethryx's voice came through, stripped of all arrogance. "We surrender." Katie nodded to her officers. "Send word to Earth. Tell them the first lesson has been delivered." She turned back to the viewport, where the wreckage of the Valith fleet drifted among the stars. The galaxy had believed that humanity was weak, that they could be threatened into submission, that they were nothing more than a minor species pretending to matter. They would not make that mistake again. Across human space, the news spread like wildfire. The Valith fleet had been destroyed. Not defeated, not driven back, destroyed, and humanity had not lost a single ship. Something changed in that moment. Something fundamental. 300 years of submission and compromise fell away like old skin. Humanity stood a little straighter. It spoke a little louder. Looked at the stars with new eyes. They were not prey anymore. They never would be again. The aftermath of the Battle of New Providence sent shock waves through every corner of known space. Within hours, every species with access to information networks knew what had happened. The mighty Valith fleet, symbol of military supremacy for thousands of years, had been annihilated by the humans they had dismissed as insignificant. It was not simply a defeat. It was a humiliation so complete that it defied comprehension. On the Valith homeworld, the news arrived like a physical blow. High Commander Zethryx had been captured. 68 warships had been destroyed. The humans had suffered no losses at all. For a species that had built their entire civilization on the concept of military dominance, this was more than a military setback. It was an existential crisis. The Valith Imperial Senate convened an emergency session, their clicking mandibles filling the great chamber with sounds of fury and fear. Some demanded immediate retaliation with an even larger fleet. Others argued for patience and caution. A few suggested that perhaps they had underestimated the humans and should seek peaceful resolution. But pride won over wisdom, as it often does with powerful species that have never known true defeat. The Senate authorized the mobilization of the Grand Fleet, every warship the Valith Empire could muster. 3,000 vessels would descend upon human space and restore Valith honor. No matter the cost, the announcement was broadcast across the galaxy. It was a warning to humanity and to any species considering similar defiance. The Valith would have their vengeance. But something unexpected was happening in the corridors of power, across known space. Species that had spent centuries afraid to oppose the Council were suddenly reconsidering their positions. The humans had done the impossible. They had stood up to the Valith and won. Not through luck or trickery, but through superior technology and tactical skill. It changed everything. The Kathrani were the first to move. Their ambassador, Vorath, was a politician who had survived 3 centuries of galactic intrigue. By understanding one simple truth, power was the only thing that mattered. Yesterday, the Valith had power. Today, that power was uncertain. And the humans had demonstrated capabilities that no one had suspected. Vorath sent a private communication to Linda Morrison, who had returned to Earth after her dramatic departure from the Council. The message was simple and direct. Ambassador Morrison, My government wishes to discuss potential trade agreements with humanity. We believe our species have much to offer each other. These discussions would be conducted privately, outside the framework of the Galactic Council. Please respond if you are interested. Linda read the message 3 times before allowing herself to smile. The Kathrani were not friends. They were opportunists who could smell a shift in power and wanted to position themselves on the winning side. But that was exactly what humanity needed right now. Not friends. Allies of convenience who would help demonstrate that Earth was not truly isolated. Respond positively, she told her staff. Express interest in preliminary discussions. Make no commitments, but keep the door open.
Ow.
Similar messages began arriving from other species over the following days. The Relary, amphibious traders who controlled vast commercial networks. The Sentinel Collective, a coalition of machine intelligences that valued efficiency above all else. The Marathi, ancient philosophers who had watched the galaxy's politics with detached amusement for millennia. All of them reached out to humanity with various proposals and inquiries. On Earth, President Daniel Hughes convened his cabinet to discuss the rapidly evolving situation. Secretary of State Rachel Simmons presented the diplomatic analysis. We've received preliminary contact from 17 different species in the past week, she reported. Some are genuinely interested in new relationships. Others are simply hedging their bets. A few might be gathering intelligence for the Valeth. But the overall trend is clear. The galaxy is reconsidering its assumptions about humanity. What about the Valeth mobilization? Hughes asked. Admiral Crawford answered that question. 3,000 ships. It will take them approximately 2 months to assemble and position their fleet. They want to overwhelm us with sheer numbers. Can we match those numbers? Crawford shook his head. No. We have approximately 500 combat-capable vessels, with another 200 in reserve. But numbers aren't everything. Our technology is superior. Our tactics are better, and they'll be attacking prepared positions instead of empty space. What are our projected casualties? Crawford hesitated. This was the question he had been dreading. If the Valeth commit their entire Grand Fleet, we estimate we can destroy approximately 80% of their forces. But we will take losses. Significant losses. Perhaps 50 to 100 ships, thousands of personnel. The room fell silent. For all their recent victory, humanity had never actually lost a warship in combat. The prospect of real casualties was sobering. There may be another option, Linda Morrison said. She had been invited to the meeting as the primary architect of humanity's withdrawal from the Council. We don't have to fight the entire Valeth fleet. We just have to make the cost of fighting unacceptable, explained Hughes said. The Valeth are already divided. Their Senate is not unanimous about this war. If we can demonstrate that attacking humanity will cost them far more than they can afford, the factions pushing for peace might gain the upper hand. We need to make them understand that this is not a battle they can win at any price. Dr. Nicholas Perry, the chief economist, nodded thoughtfully. The financial angle is interesting. The Valeth economy is heavily dependent on military contracts and colonial extraction. If they lose 3,000 ships, the economic impact would be devastating. We could accelerate that impact by targeting their supply lines and industrial bases. That would mean striking Valeth territory, Crawford pointed out. Offensive operations, not just defense. Yes, Linda agreed. We would need to show them that they are not safe, that humanity can reach them wherever they hide, that continuing this war will destroy them even if they somehow manage to hurt us. President Hughes considered the options carefully. For 300 years, humanity had played defense. They had reacted to threats instead of creating them. They had let others set the terms of every engagement. Perhaps it was time to change that. Prepare a list of potential targets, he finally said. Strategic installations. Supply depots. Anything that would make them think twice about continuing this war? We won't strike first, but when they come for us, we'll show them that we can hurt them just as badly. The meeting continued for several more hours, discussing logistics and strategies and diplomatic approaches. But the fundamental decision had been made. Humanity would not simply wait to be attacked. They would take the initiative and shape the battlefield to their advantage. News of the Valith. Grand Fleet mobilization spread quickly through human space. Unlike the fear that the Council had expected, the response was remarkably calm. People had seen what their military could do at New Providence. They had witnessed the destruction of an enemy that had seemed invincible. Fear was being replaced by something far more dangerous: confidence. In shipyards across human territory, construction accelerated. New vessels took shape in weeks instead of months. Veterans volunteered to return to active duty. Young people enlisted in numbers not seen since the earliest days of human space exploration. The entire civilization was mobilizing, not out of desperation, but out of determination. The Valith were coming with 3,000 ships. They expected to face a frightened species desperately defending their last refuges. They expected easy prey. They were going to be very disappointed. Meanwhile, the diplomatic initiatives continued to bear fruit. The Kathrani signed a preliminary trade agreement that gave humanity access to their commercial networks. The Relary offered to share navigational data that would help human ships move through neutral space more efficiently. The Sentinel Collective expressed interest in exchanging technological information. Each agreement was small by itself, but together they formed a pattern. Humanity was not alone anymore. They were building something new, a network of relationships based on mutual benefit instead of domination. A coalition of species who saw the old Council system crumbling and wanted to be part of whatever came next. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was at the center of that change. Linda Morrison watched the diplomatic traffic flowing through her office and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. A month ago, no one in the galaxy had taken humanity seriously. Now they were at the center of a political transformation that would reshape interstellar civilization for generations to come. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. And it was only the beginning. 1 year had passed since humanity walked away from the Galactic Council. 1 year since the Battle of New Providence had shattered assumptions that had stood for millennia. 1 year that had transformed the political landscape of known space. More completely than the previous 1,000 years combined, the Valith Grand Fleet had never arrived. 2 weeks before their planned attack, their home system was struck by a series of precision raids that destroyed 3 major shipyards, to fuel processing facilities and the communication hub that coordinated their entire military network. The attacks lasted less than an hour. Human ships appeared, struck their targets with devastating accuracy, and vanished back into deep space before any response could be organized. The message was clear. The Valith were not safe. Their territory was not protected. Every military asset they possessed was vulnerable to destruction at any time. The Senate's war faction collapsed overnight. Voices calling for peace suddenly found themselves in the majority. 3 months later, the Valith Empire signed a non-aggression pact with the United Earth government. They did not apologize for their attempted conquest. Their pride would not allow that. But they formally recognized human sovereignty over all existing territories and pledged to pursue diplomatic solutions to any future disputes. High Commander Zetherix, released from human custody as part of the agreement, returned to his homeworld in disgrace. He was quietly retired to a remote estate where he spent his remaining years writing memoirs that blamed everyone except himself for the disaster. But the peace with the Valith was only one piece of the transformation sweeping across the galaxy. The network of relationships that humanity had built during the crisis had grown into something far more significant. The Human Compact, as it came to be called, now included 23 member species, not subjects, not colonies. Partners in a new kind of interstellar organization, the Compact operated on principles that would have seemed revolutionary to the Galactic Council. All members had equal voting rights regardless of their size or military power. Decisions were made through genuine consensus, not through the manipulation of elder species. Trade agreements were negotiated fairly, with benefits distributed according to contribution rather than political influence. Military cooperation was voluntary, with no species required to participate in conflicts they opposed. It was messy. It was inefficient. Arguments and disagreements were constant. But it was also fair in a way that the Council had never been. Species that had spent centuries as second-class members of the galactic community suddenly found themselves treated with respect and dignity. They responded with loyalty and commitment that the Council could never have commanded through fear. The first official assembly of the Human Compact was held on Unity Station, a massive construction that orbited a star precisely between human space and their closest allies. The station had been built in just 8 months through the combined efforts of 6 different species. It represented everything the Compact stood for: cooperation, shared purpose, and mutual benefit. Ambassador Linda Morrison stood before the gathered delegates as the Assembly's first speaker. She had become the public face of humanity's new role in the galaxy, a position she accepted with characteristic grace and determination. Around her sat representatives from dozens of species, their forms ranging from humanoid to utterly alien. All of them watched as she approached the central podium. "Friends and partners," she began. "1 year ago, humanity made a choice. We walked away from a system that treated us as inferior. We rejected the assumption that strength gave the right to dominate. We stood alone against powers that had ruled the galaxy for millennia." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the assembly. "Many believed we would be destroyed, that our defiance would lead to our extinction, that we were foolish to challenge the established order. They were wrong. Not because humanity was stronger than our enemies, although we were. They were wrong because the established order was already dying. The Council system was built on fear and exploitation. It survived not because it served the galaxy well, but because no one dared to oppose it. When we stood up, something remarkable happened. Others found the courage to stand with us. Species that had suffered in silence for generations suddenly saw that there was another way. That cooperation could replace domination. That partnership could replace subjugation. That a galaxy built on mutual respect was not just a dream, but a possibility. She gestured to the assembly around her. "This is that possibility made real. The Human Compact is not perfect. We have disagreements. We make mistakes. We struggle with challenges that have no easy solutions. But we face those challenges together as equals. We build instead of destroy. We include instead of exclude. We look forward instead of backward. The old powers will not accept this change peacefully. The Council still exists, weakened but not gone. There will be those who try to undermine what we have built, who seek to return to the old ways of ear and force. We must remain vigilant. We must remain strong. But we must also remember why we fight. Not for power, not for territory, not for revenge. We fight for the right of every species to choose their own path, to live in dignity, to reach for their full potential without being crushed by those who fear their growth." Linda smiled, and for a moment, the weight of responsibility lifted from her shoulders. Humanity did not end all negotiations because we wanted to be alone. We ended them because we refused to negotiate away our dignity, our freedom, our future. And in doing so, we discovered that we were never really alone at all. We discovered that the galaxy was full of species who shared our values, our hopes, our dreams. We just needed to give them the courage to stand up and be counted. Today we stand together. Tomorrow, we will build together. And someday, perhaps we will show the entire galaxy that there's a better way. That the strong need not prey upon the weak. That difference need not lead to conflict. That all species, whatever their origin or nature, deserve the chance to reach for the stars. The assembly hall erupted in applause from a dozen different species, expressed in a dozen different ways. Linda stepped back from the podium and allowed herself a moment of pure satisfaction. 1 year ago, she had walked out of the council chamber knowing that humanity was about to face its greatest challenge. Today, she stood at the center of a new civilization that humanity had helped create. Admiral Katie Walsh watched the broadcast from her flagship, The Reckoning. The vessel had become something of a legend after the Battle of New Providence, and Katie had been promoted to command the entire human fleet. She was still getting used to the responsibility. Her first officer, now Captain Daniel Price, stood beside her as the applause continued. "Think it will last?" he asked quietly. Katie considered the question carefully. The compact was young and fragile. There would be challenges ahead, betrayals, conflicts, moments when everything they had built seemed ready to collapse. She had no illusions about the difficulty of the road ahead. I think she finally said that it has a chance, a real chance. And that's more than we had a year ago. She turned back to the viewport, where the stars stretched endlessly in all directions. Somewhere out there, species that had never heard of humanity were going about their lives. Somewhere out there, challenges they could not imagine were waiting to be faced. Somewhere out there, the future was being written, and humanity, for the first time in their history, would help write it, on Earth, on colony worlds, on ships sailing the vast darkness between stars. Humans looked up at the sky with new eyes. They were no longer the junior species begging for scraps at the galactic table. They were builders of a new order, partners in a great experiment, pioneers of a future they would create together with allies they had never expected to find. The galaxy would never be the same, and this was only the beginning. In the great chamber of the Galactic Council, now half empty after the departures of so many species, the remaining members watched the broadcast from Unity Station with a mixture of fear and fascination. The old order was crumbling. Something new was rising from the wreckage. Whether it would prove better or worse remained to be seen, but one thing was certain. When humanity had ended all negotiations, they had not ended hope. They had sparked it, and that spark was now a fire that would burn across the galaxy for generations to come. The humans had shown the universe what was possible when a species refused to accept limits imposed by others. When courage replaced fear, when cooperation replaced domination, they had shown the galaxy that the future belonged to those willing to reach for it, and they were just getting started.